The email arrived at 10:32 p.m. on a Tuesday, buried between spam and work messages. Maylin almost deleted it. The subject line read, "I think you're my sister." She stared at the screen in her Chicago apartment, coffee growing cold in her hands. The sender's name was Zhen Liu, Chinese, like hers had been before the Williamson family gave her their name. "My name is Zhen. I was born in Guangzhou in 1993. I was adopted when I was 2 years old. I've been looking for my family for years. Your photo on the adoption registry looks exactly like me. Please, if this is real, call me." Attached was a phone number and a photo. Maylin's heart stopped. The woman in the picture had her eyes, her nose, the same small scar above the left eyebrow that Maylin had always wondered about. 31 years. 31 years of believing she was alone in this world. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. She dialed before she could change her mind. "Hello?" The voice was nervous, hopeful. "Is this Jen?" "Yes, is this Maylin?" The name sounded foreign in that voice, yet somehow right, like coming home to a place you've never been. "I think," Maylin whispered, "we need to meet." Three weeks later, Maylin stood outside a coffee shop in Manhattan, watching every Asian woman who walked by. Her palms were sweating despite the October chill. When Jen arrived, it was like looking into a mirror that reflected a different life. Same face, but everything else was wrong. Jen wore an expensive coat and carried a designer bag. Her posture screamed confidence, money, success. Maylin had chosen her best jeans and a sweater from Target. "Maylin?" Jin's voice was softer in person. They embraced awkwardly, two strangers sharing DNA and nothing else. Inside the coffee shop, they sat across from each other, studying faces they'd never seen but somehow knew. "I can't believe this is real," Jin said, pulling out her phone to take a selfie. "Wait until my adoptive parents see this. They're going to cry." Maylin nodded, but something twisted in her stomach. Jin seemed too comfortable with all of this, too eager to document it. "I've been writing about my adoption story. It's going to be a book, a memoir, about growing up Chinese American, searching for identity, you know?" "A book?" Maylin's coffee tasted bitter suddenly. "Publishers are interested. The story of two sisters, separated by policy, reunited by fate. It's powerful stuff." Maylin forced a smile, but her hands tightened around her mug. This felt wrong. They'd just met, and Jin was already planning to write about her? "I was hoping," Jin said carefully, "you might want to be part of it. Co-write it, maybe? Share your story, too?" "My story isn't very interesting," Maylin said quietly. "The Williamsons were good to me. Normal life. Nothing dramatic." Jin's eyes gleamed. "Every story is dramatic if you tell it right." That night, alone in her hotel room, Maylin stared at the ceiling and wondered if finding her sister was the best thing that had ever happened to her, or the worst. Two months after their first meeting, Jen sent Maylin the first 3 chapters of her memoir. The subject line read, "Our story, first draft." Maylin opened the attachment with curiosity that quickly turned to horror. According to Jen's version, their birth mother had been a factory worker who died in childbirth. Their father, devastated and unable to care for twins, had made the heartbreaking decision to give them away to ensure they'd have better lives in America. It was beautiful, tragic, heart-wrenching, and completely wrong. Maylin's adoption papers told a different story. Her birth mother had surrendered her due to the one-child policy pressures, but she had been alive, healthy. There was no mention of twins, no tragic death, no grieving father. She called Jen immediately. "The story about our parents," Maylin said without preamble, "it's not true." "What do you mean?" "I have my adoption papers. Our birth mother didn't die, and there's no mention of our father at all." Silence stretched between them across the phone line. "Maylin," Chen said finally, "sometimes the truth needs to be enhanced to make people understand the real emotion behind it." "Enhanced?" Maylin's voice rose. "You mean lied about?" "I mean made more impactful. The core truth is still there. We were separated as children. The details don't matter as much as the feeling." "The details don't matter?" Maylin was standing now, pacing her small living room. "These are our lives, Chen, our real lives. And I'm trying to honor them. Do you know how many adoptees will read this and feel less alone? How many people will understand what we went through?" But it's not what we went through. It's what you made up. Another long pause. You weren't planning to fact-check me, were you? Chen's voice had turned cold. The question hit Mei Lin like a slap. I wasn't planning for my own sister to lie to me. After she hung up, Mei Lin sat in the dark, wondering if the sister she had found was real at all. Mei Lin couldn't sleep for days after that phone call. She pulled out every document from her adoption file, spread them across her kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene. The photos were there, grainy black and white images of a young woman holding a baby, her birth mother, alive, not dead, as Zen had written. The woman looked tired but determined, not heartbroken as Zen had described. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zen. Can we talk? There's something I need to tell you. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd first reunited. This time Zen looked different, smaller somehow. The confidence was gone. I lied about the book, Zen said without meeting Mei Lin's eyes, but I need you to understand why. I'm listening. Zen's hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. My adoptive parents gave me this when I turned 18. They said it was time I knew the truth. Inside was a receipt, not adoption papers, a receipt for $20,000 paid to someone called Bright Future Adoptions. In the memo line, someone had written, baby girl, age 2. They bought me, Zen whispered. My whole life, I knew I wasn't just adopted, I was purchased. Mei Lin stared at the paper, her mind reeling. But that's illegal. Very illegal. My parents, the ones who raised me, they tried to explain. They said they were desperate for a child, that the legitimate adoption process was too long, too expensive. They said they thought it was just faster paperwork. Did you believe them? Zen's laugh was bitter. Would you? Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted to know your story first. I needed to know if you were bought too, or if you were the lucky one who actually got adopted properly. Mei Lin felt sick. So you lied in the book to hide the real truth? I lied in the book because the real truth is uglier than fiction. Who wants to read about human trafficking disguised as adoption? People want hope, not horror. But it's our horror to tell, Zen, not yours to bury. Zen finally looked up, tears in her eyes. I've spent my whole life wondering if I was stolen or sold. I need to know which one you were. 6 weeks later, they stood together in the Beijing airport, two American women carrying Chinese faces back to a country they'd never really known. Are you sure about this? Mei Lin asked, as they waited for their connecting flight to Guangzhou. Jin nodded, but her hands were shaking. I've hired a private investigator, someone who specializes in adoption cases from the 90s. If anyone can find answers, it's him. The investigator was a thin man named Wang, who met them at their hotel. He spoke perfect English and carried a folder thick with documents. The orphanage where you were both processed burned down in 2001, he said without ceremony, but I found the director who worked there during your time. She's agreed to meet you. The woman they met the next day was ancient and fragile, but her eyes were sharp as knives. She studied both sisters for a long moment before speaking. I remember you two, she said in accented English. Not together, separately, different times. Different times? Mei Lin's heart sank. You, she pointed at Mei Lin, came from family. Proper surrender, paper signed. Very sad, but very legal. Then she turned to Jin. You came different way. No papers, no family. Just appeared one night. What does that mean? Jin's voice was barely a whisper. The old woman's expression darkened. Means someone brought you who shouldn't have. Means someone took you from where you belonged. The room felt like it was spinning. Mei Lin reached for Jin's hand, and for the first time since they'd met, Jin didn't pull away. Who? Jin asked. Who brought me? People who made money from children. People who found babies and sold them to foreigners who asked no questions. As they left the meeting, walking through the crowded streets of Guangzhou, neither sister spoke. They were strangers in their own birthplace, searching for a truth that kept slipping away like smoke. But they were searching together now. The next lead came from an unexpected source. Wang had tracked down a former employee of the trafficking ring that had operated in Guangzhou during the 90s. The woman agreed to meet them in a park, but only Zhen. She was terrified of being seen with too many people. Mei Lin waited at the hotel, pacing and checking her phone every few minutes. When Zhen returned 3 hours later, her face was white as paper. "What did she tell you?" Mei Lin asked. Zhen sat down heavily on the hotel bed. "She remembered me. She said I was brought in when I was 18 months old. A man had stolen me from a market while my grandmother was shopping." "Your grandmother?" "My real grandmother. The woman said my family had been looking for me for months. They put up posters, offered rewards, but I was already gone, already sold to the adoption ring." Mei Lin felt the world tilting. "You were stolen from your family? And you," Zhen looked up with haunted eyes, "were given away legally. Your birth mother chose to surrender you. Mine never chose anything." The cruel irony wasn't lost on either of them. Mei Lin had always wondered if her birth mother had loved her enough to let her go. Zhen had always wondered if hers had loved her enough to try to keep her. Now they knew, but knowing hurt worse than wondering. "There's something else," Zhen said quietly. "The woman said my adoptive parents knew. They knew I was stolen, not surrendered. The price was different for stolen children, higher because of the risk." "Your parents knew?" $20,000. That's the going rate for a stolen child in 1995. Mei Lin sank into the chair across from her sister. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," Zhen whispered. "For the first time in my life, I have no idea what to do with the truth." Back in America, Mei Lin couldn't stop thinking about what they'd learned, but something didn't add up. Zhen had seemed shocked by the trafficking story, but there had been something in her eyes, something that looked like recognition, not revelation. Mei Lin decided to do her own research. She called Zhen's adoptive mother directly. "Mrs. Bennett? This is Mei Lin, Zhen's sister." "Oh." The woman's voice was warm but surprised. "Zhen didn't mention you'd be calling." "I wanted to ask about Zhen's adoption. She mentioned you told her about it when she turned 18? A long pause. "Well, yes. We thought she deserved to know the truth." "The truth about the money you paid?" Another pause, longer this time. "She told you about that?" "She said you didn't know it was illegal when you paid it." "Oh." Mrs. Bennett's voice grew quiet. "Is that what she said?" Mei Lin's blood ran cold. "What really happened?" We knew it wasn't entirely legal, but we'd been trying to adopt for 7 years. We were desperate. The agency said it was just cutting through red tape. We knew it was wrong, but we wanted a child so badly. And Zhen knew this? We told her everything when she turned 18. We thought honesty was better than lies. She seemed to understand. She said she was grateful we'd been honest with her. After Mei Lin hung up, she sat in her car outside her apartment building for an hour, too angry to go inside. Zhen had known. She'd always known that her adoption was illegal, that her parents paid money for a stolen child, and she'd let Mei Lin think they were both victims of the same system, when the truth was that Zhen's family had actively participated in it. She drove to Zhen's apartment in Brooklyn without calling first. "Mei Lin," Zhen opened the door in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I talked to your mother." Zhen's face went pale. "Which mother?" "Mrs. Bennett, your adoptive mother, the one who told me the truth about what your family knew." Zhen stepped back, and Mei Lin pushed into the apartment. "You knew. You've always known that your adoption was illegal, that your parents paid money for a stolen child, and you let me think we were the same. We are the same." "No," Mei Lin's voice cracked. "We're not. My family saved me." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Mei Lin was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. "I trusted you. I thought you were the one person in the world who understood what I'd been through, but you've been lying to me from the beginning. I lied in the book because the truth is too complicated for people to understand. You lied to me because you didn't want me to know who you really are." "You want to know who I really am?" Jen's voice was rising now too. I'm someone who spent my whole childhood knowing I was bought like a pet from a store. I'm someone who lived with people who looked at me and saw their $20,000 investment, not their daughter. That's not... Yes, it is. Jen slammed her hand on the counter. Do you know what it's like to grow up knowing you're stolen goods? To wonder every day of somewhere in China there's a family still looking for you, still grieving for you? Maylin stepped back, stunned by the pain in her sister's voice. I wrote that book because I needed people to care about stories like ours, but the truth is too ugly. The truth is that American families paid criminals to steal children from Chinese families. The truth is that the adoption system was corrupt and everyone knew it and no one cared because the children were Chinese and the families were American. So you decided to lie instead? I decided to tell a story that would make people listen. Jen was crying now too. Do you think anyone wants to read about human trafficking, about how their neighbors might have bought stolen children? They want to read about noble birth mothers making sacrificial choices, not about criminal networks selling babies to the highest bidder. But that's not our story. It's part of our story, the part that matters. The part that matters is that you lied to me, your own sister. My own sister who got the fairy tale adoption while I got sold like merchandise. The words hung in the air between them like poison. You think I got a fairy tale? Maylin's voice was deadly quiet. You think growing up wondering why your own mother didn't want you is a fairy tale? You think spending your whole life feeling like you don't belong anywhere is a fairy tale? At least you belong somewhere legal. And at least you had a sister who wanted to find you. Past tense. Maylin walked toward the door. Where are you going? Home, to my real life, with my real family who didn't buy me. Maylin, wait! But the door was already closing. For 2 weeks, they didn't speak. Maylin threw herself into work, trying to forget that for a brief moment, she'd had a sister. Jean stopped posting on social media entirely, something her friends noticed immediately. It was Mrs. Williamson, Maylin's adoptive mother, who finally broke the silence. "Honey," she said during their weekly phone call, "you sound miserable." "I'm fine, Mom." "You're many things, but fine isn't one of them. What's going on with your sister?" Maylin found herself telling the whole story. The lies, the illegal adoption, the fight, everything. "Oh, sweetheart," Mrs. Williamson said when she finished. "That poor girl." "Poor girl? She lied to me." She lied to protect herself. Can you imagine carrying that shame your whole life, knowing that the people who raised you broke the law to get you? But I trusted her. And she trusted you enough to eventually tell you the truth. That has to count for something. That night, Maylin called Jean. "I don't want to fight anymore," she said when Jean answered. "I don't either." Jean's voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "But I need you to promise me something. No more lies. Not between us." "I promise." And we tell our adoptive families together. Both families need to know what we found out. Even yours? They didn't do anything wrong. They need to know what you went through, and yours need to face what they did. The conversation with the Bennetts was the hardest thing either sister had ever done. They flew to California together, united for the first time since their reunion. "We love you," Mr. Bennett said, tears streaming down his face. "We've always loved you like our own daughter." "I know, but I need you to understand what loving me cost someone else's family. We never meant for anyone to get hurt, but someone did get hurt. My real family in China spent years looking for me. Maybe they're still looking." The conversation with the Williamsons was different, but just as painful. They listened to Jean's story with horror and compassion. "We had no idea," Mrs. Williamson said, holding Jean's hand. "If we had known what was happening to other families?" "You couldn't have known, but now you do. And now we all have to decide what to do with the truth."
One year later, they published the book together. Not Jen's memoir full of beautiful lies, but a new book full of ugly truths. Stolen and Sold: How the International Adoption System Failed Two Sisters became a bestseller, not because it was heartwarming, but because it was honest. They donated every penny of the profits to organizations working to reunite trafficked children with their families. Jen never found her original family in China. The investigator tried for months, but too much time had passed. Too many records had been destroyed. But she made peace with not knowing, because she finally had someone who understood the weight of that not knowing. Maylin learned that being legally adopted didn't erase the trauma of being unwanted. but having a sister who carried a different kind of trauma helped both of them feel less alone in their pain. They still fought sometimes. Jen still had a tendency to exaggerate for effect. Malin still had trouble trusting easily, but they fought like sisters now, with the knowledge that they'd choose each other again even after knowing the worst about each other. On the anniversary of their first meeting, they returned to that coffee shop in Manhattan. "Do you ever regret it?" Malin asked. "Finding each other, learning all of this?" Jen considered the question seriously. "I regret how much it hurt. I regret the lies I told. I regret that our story isn't simpler." "But do you regret finding me?" "Never." Jen reached across the table and took her sister's hand. "Before you, I had a past full of questions and no one to ask them with. Now, I have a sister full of answers, even when the answers are terrible." "Even when the answers are terrible," Malin agreed. Outside, snow was beginning to fall in the city where two strangers had become sisters by choosing truth over comfort, reality over fiction. They walked home together, two women who'd learned that family isn't about the story you're told about your beginning. It's about who you choose to stand with when you finally learn how that story really ends.